Today on Inside Utah Politics, Representative Chris Stewart. We're catching up with the congressman to get his thoughts on the election, the future of the Republican Party, his work on suicide prevention, and more. And the first Utahns have now taken the first dose of the coronavirus vaccine. What does this step mean for the overall pandemic? Our panel weighs in.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin today with Representative Chris Stewart. He joins us via Zoom from Salt Lake International Airport. Representative, that's a first for the show.
A first for the show. It's a beautiful airport. Boy, I hope everyone in Utah has a chance to come down and enjoy it as they travel. And we look forward to a day when more people are traveling and interacting with their family and just getting out. And that day's coming, which I know you're going to talk about later on in the show. Yeah,
no doubt about that. It's good to have you on the show. It's been a while. So let's get into it right away. Let's start with the election results. I know that more than 100 of your colleagues, Republican colleagues in the House, endorsed the lawsuit from Texas seeking to overturn those results in 4 states. You were not one of them. But I haven't really heard you speak publicly your thoughts on the results. So what are you thinking?
Well, obviously, I'm disappointed with the outcome from the election. That's not going to surprise anyone. And I have great respect for President Trump and really the policy successes he has had, I think have just helped tens of millions of Americans. But the outcome wasn't what I was hoping for. And look, I understand why the president and many others were concerned. I understand why there was questions, and we should answer those questions. I've supported, in every one of these cases, I've supported the different lawsuits. If there are questions or doubts, they absolutely should be answered. I mean, the very worst thing we could do is leave them lingering and find out the truth and then just tell the people the truth. But I think we've reached a point where the electors have spoken. And although that's disappointing for many of us, and although there are still lingering questions that I think should be pursued so that people know, that's where we are. And now my responsibility then falls on trying to defend Utah values and advocate for Utah values with the new president.
So, Representative, at this point, do you acknowledge the results as legitimate?
Well, yeah. I mean, the electorals have spoken. I do think, though, Glenn, and this is very important, I think, for anyone. Whether you like the president or not, whether you supported the president or not, there are legitimate concerns. There are legitimate questions. And once again, we should answer those questions. The very worst thing that could happen is for half of America to feel like the electoral process is violated in some way. And then just to leave that lingering, we should pursue those questions and answer those questions.
But and just to be clear, though, Representative, we have seen those cases make their way through the courts more than 50 times, and the courts set those aside. Even in some cases, specifically Pennsylvania, saying this case lacks merit and there is no evidence to support it. But yet the president still claims widespread fraud.
In some of the cases, there's no question about that, including the Supreme Court case. And I'm not even specifically addressing individual cases. As you said, there's more than 50 of them, and some of them have not been resolved and should be. I'm talking more broadly than that, Glenn. I'm talking about the entire process. Have we got safeguards in place to make sure that people who move don't vote in 2 states? Have we got safeguards in place to make sure that signatures are being compared and that they're actually being authenticated? Have we got safeguards in case where we can assure American people that the voting machines are not being manipulated? And by the way, that's been bipartisan. Vice President Biden made that point 2 years ago. He was adamant about these machines open us up to hacking, and we need to be careful about that. Those are the questions I'm talking about. I'm talking about specific to this, but more broadly about we can't have American people lose faith in the electoral process. If we do that, we lose faith in our future and our ability to govern ourselves.
Okay, Representative, you say right now that you accept the results of the election. Other Republicans are saying the same thing in the nation's capital, but the president is still saying this election was stolen. He has not conceded. Are you concerned about the doubt this is sowing within millions of Americans across the country when it comes to this important institution of voting?
Well, once again, I think the electorals have spoken. Most Americans see that. The president has a different view. I don't think that surprises anyone. I think people who say this is going to lead to the downfall of our republic are greatly exaggerated. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the same thing happened with Al Gore in 2000 and others. There have been others who have taken cases to the courts We will survive this, and in a little more than a month, it will be over regardless. So,
Okay.
if the president wants to pursue these, he has absolute right to do that. And I can't speak nor control his views on this.
I want to get your thoughts on the Republican Party as a whole. Is the president going to continue to be the standard bearer over the next 4 years for the Republican Party, or is this an opportunity for someone else to rise up and carry that mantle?
Well, I think probably both of them are true, but to what degree, we just don't know. I mean, if someone knows that future, then please enlighten the rest of us. I don't think the president is going to, retire down to Mar-a-Lago and we'll never hear from him again. That seems extraordinarily unlikely, and I hope he doesn't do that. I want him to continue to advocate and to continue to speak for things that he thinks are important. I do, however, think that there are other Republicans who are ready and prepared, and I hope that they will step forward as well. Now, Do I hope the president runs again? I mean, I really don't know.
If that were to happen, what are the potential risks to the party? We don't have to look any further than the state of Utah to see significant numbers of Republicans did not vote for this president. A Republican incumbent should be doing better than 58% in the state of Utah. He finished dead last when you compare him to all of the statewide Republicans on the ballot. So is there a risk to the party for him to continue to maintain his power?
Well, Glenn, I mean, I think I know what you're saying, but he can't maintain his power, not in a sense literally.
Right, within the party is what I mean.
Advocating. But you look, like everything in politics, there's some upsides and some downsides to it. Yeah, there's no question that there were some people who disagreed with his style and his the very boisterous and kind of aggressive manner that he showed. On the other hand, there's tens of millions of people who greatly appreciate it, who feel like he's talking for me, he's advocating for me. And this isn't a zero-sum game. There's some good and there's some trade-offs, regardless of what he does. But once again, the party is big enough that we're going to be able to, continue to embrace a lot of things that President Trump has stood for and has fought for. And at the same time, other people will, I think, find a voice and they'll be able to move forward. And Glenn, one other thing I want to mention, and I know this isn't probably what you want to talk about, but it's really important. If you talk about the future of the party, I mean, Republicans came within a few votes of taking the House once again. I'm confident we'll take the House majority in 2020. We protected the Senate. We are positioned for a dramatic realignment in the American electoral because of where we are right now. You're going to see the more and more minorities embrace the Republican Party.
No, it was definitely a good night for the Republican Party. You only lost 2 seats in the Senate, but also gained 1 there, and we'll see how Georgia plays out. But no doubt, it was a good night for you and your colleagues in the Republican Party. Representative, you've been doing some important work on suicide prevention. I want to get to that. Why did you pick up that issue and carry some of these bills across the finish line? We have about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, okay, I'll try and be brief. Look, when I went to the House, I didn't know that I would become involved with this, but I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity. And the reason is really pretty simple, Glenn. It's because I don't know anyone who hasn't been impacted in their life, either their own family or someone that they love, by suicide or suicide attempt. It's just pervasive through our society, and frankly, Utah is not the best in the country in this. We're the 5th highest suicide rate in the country, and that shocks a lot of people. And it's heartbreaking. And the reality is that we could do some things that could help. And so the suicide prevention hotline number, it's going to save thousands of lives. What an honor to be able to be the leader on that. And the Suicide Act, which is pending now, the president signed the hotline number. But there's one other piece to that, which we still need to get through the House, which helps collect data and information and just makes us more informed as we begin to study the causes and how to treat suicide. That's another important part of it. So, I'm really, really grateful we've had the opportunity to work on this and to help Americans who really are the most vulnerable among us. Oh my gosh, if you deal with depression or mental illness, that is heartbreaking for families. And there's things we can do to help. And once again, I'm just so honored that we've been involved with that.
And it has really hit us hard here in the state of Utah, as you mentioned. And a lot of people were really on board with this hotline because it's going to be one simple number that everyone can remember in a time of crisis. Pick up that phone and help will be right there. And that number is 988.
988, you call that immediately in the middle of a mental health crisis. If you said, when you don't know where to turn, you're afraid of your spouse, one of your children, a friend, call that number and you're going to immediately be talking to people who are going to be able to help you and help with an intervention if it's necessary.
All right. Representative, I wanted to get into some of your priorities heading into the next session, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Perhaps you can come back in a couple of weeks and we can get more.
We'll come back. Love to do that. Thank you.
All right, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
Still to come, we continue the conversation on the Electoral College certification. Our panel debates a little bit later. But first, as Republican leaders acknowledge Joe Biden as the next president, Democrats are calling out the president. We'll get to that after the break. Following the Electoral College vote, further cementing President-elect Joe Biden's victory, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell recognized Biden and Kamala Harris as the winners of the 2020 election for the first time. As Washington correspondent Raquel Martin reports, as more GOP lawmakers are expected to follow suit, some Democrats say the action is far overdue and are demanding President Trump to concede.
With the electoral votes cast,
the Electoral College has spoken.
And with the Senate chaplain's blessing,
bless President-elect Joseph Biden.
Tuesday, for the first time, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell officially recognized the next president.
So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden. The President-elect is no stranger to the Senate. He's devoted himself to public service.
And he's not alone. Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt, and Indiana Senator Todd Young are among a growing list of Republican lawmakers now accepting the president's defeat.
It's very important that each of us pledges to work with President-elect Biden.
The acknowledgement comes more than a month after Biden claimed victory and after weeks of failed legal challenges from the Trump campaign and supporters.
The conservative-leaning Supreme Court summarily dismissed this effort outright, rejecting the lawsuit.
Illinois Democratic Senator Dick Durbin says he's glad some Senate Republicans are accepting reality.
Enough is enough.
But Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says all Republicans must follow suit.
For the sake of our democracy, for the sake of the peaceful transition of power.
Yesterday's vote was one step in the constitutional process.
But White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany says the president isn't ready to back down.
The president is still involved in ongoing litigation.
One final step lies ahead. House lawmakers will certify the Electoral College vote results on January 6th. In Washington, Raquel Martin.
The Trump administration is pushing to approve the final step to allow drilling in one of the largest and last protected areas in the country, Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which has been protected in a bipartisan way for some 60 years. Those leases would also allow logging and mining. Washington correspondent Alexandra Limon reports.
In its final weeks, the Trump administration is moving to approve land leases for drilling oil and gas in Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
Trying to do all they can to undermine decades of bipartisan progress that we've made on environmental protection.
Drilling in the refuge was approved as part of the 2017 tax reform law, and in a statement, the Bureau of Land Management said it's now simply trying to meet the law's requirements. California Congressman Mike Levin and Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley say Democrats are fighting to stop the land leases.
To ensure that the process is not short-circuited for the narrow interests of a handful of polluters.
A group of us wrote to 11 major banks and asked them not to provide financing for this drilling, and the banks have all said, you're right, we will not finance this.
Enrique Sala is a marine ecologist and author and works with governments to help protect wild lands and oceans.
Extracting that oil is not going to change the global price, the global oil market.
He says opening up the refuge to drilling will drastically impact global climate.
And it would affect one of the most pristine, wild, wonderful places that we have left.
Drilling activity is incredibly disruptive and damaging to this very fragile Arctic landscape.
Lawmakers say once the land leases are approved, reversing them would be difficult. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
Still to come, the vaccine has arrived in Utah and has been taken by some of our frontline hospital workers. We'll get into this latest development with our panel after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now for a deeper discussion on some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have former Utah GOP Chair James Evans and State Representative Andrew Stoddard. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's first start off with the vaccine. It arrived in Utah. Some of our frontline hospital workers have already taken round one. Let's talk about this step. A lot of people see it as a huge step for hope in seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, but let's break this down. What does this step mean when we're talking about the overall fight in this pandemic? Representative, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it is the huge step that we believe it to be. And just to look at all the science and hard work that's gone into this, it's just an incredible feat to think of how quickly this came out. And I think a lot of people assumed we would be in this for the very long haul, and thinking that anyone who wants a vaccine can have one potentially by next summer is just incredible.
James, your thoughts?
Well, you know, we have to look at, I'm going to look at this a little bit through the political lens of saying you have to give credit to President Trump for creating this warp speed mindset to say, let's get a vaccine. I think it's the first time in history we've gotten a vaccine in less than a year for an untested virus. And so I think this is a psychological change of mindset. So I'm just grateful we can move forward and perhaps get a long-term cure.
State officials, Dr. Angela Dunn, still warning though, look, we still need to continue to practice what we have been for the last couple of months, maybe well into next fall. We're talking masks, social distancing. Are people going to stay on board with that and be willing to stick with that for that long? Representative.
I hope so. You know, we're in this so long that it would be silly to just give it up now, and so hopefully people can stick with it and that we can end this on a good note, because it's been really hard so far.
Yeah, definitely fatigue setting in, no doubt about that. James, are Utahns willing to go the distance with this through fall?
Well, I think we can look at the history of this. The Spanish flu that was in 1918, so we've had the Spanish flu for over 100 years. I think we will adopt our behavior the same way as during the flu season. There's going to be a vaccine. I think people are going to become more relaxed knowing that there's somewhat of a cure for the disease. So I think people are going to kind of fall back into, you know, historical patterns of behavior.
Representative, I'd like to get your thoughts on something that James brought up, and that is this Operation Warp Speed. Unprecedented, something we've never seen. Do you give credit to the Trump administration for that?
You know, I applaud them for investing money into research and science. But I also think it's amazing that the Pfizer vaccine was the first to come through that did not participate in the Operation Warp Speed, and also that it was created by immigrants and minorities. And I think we need to give all scientists credit for the hard work that they've done, and you know, I'm sure the long hours they put in to be able to get us this vaccine this quickly.
All right, on Monday, the Electoral College meeting and certifying the vote. President Trump still not conceding this election. James, now that we're to this point, what are the next steps for the president?
Well, you know, I think the president said that he will abide by the decision of the Electoral College. They have voted, so the transition will...
But they have still come out this week, James, and said we're not ready to give up just yet.
Yeah, I mean, if they still have issues they want to litigate, they have every right to do that. But as far as the transition process, the Electoral College has cast their ballot, so the transition will continue on course, and barring some sort of U.S. Supreme Court intervention.
Representative, your thoughts on the president continuing to fight this?
I mean, he's had his chance to litigate it. There's been no credible evidence. As a lawyer, I look at this and I think it's ridiculous that they're continuing to fight this without any credible evidence. I think it's a disgrace to our courts, and to put them in this type of political situation is really unfortunate.
I just wanted to say I actually agree with that mindset, and we should just adapt it to the whole Russia hoax as well, with the impeachment and all of that. So all of that could go in the same basket of being unfortunate.
James, I want to get your thoughts on this, though. During the week, we saw the president calling out 2 Republican governors, that would be Ducey and Kemp, of Arizona and Georgia, respectively. Those were governors that stood by him on the campaign trail. They were supporting him, and he called them out saying, which one is the worst governor? Remember, vote them out. What impact is this having on the Republican Party when you see the president calling out governors who just weeks before were standing right beside him at campaign events, and now this turn?
Well, that's politics. They can have disagreements. That's their decisions to make. I look at a broader issue, which is that there's no way that the Democrats are going to be able to turn the page and say, let's move forward and not address what they did over the last 4 years to this president with an impeachment, with the Russia hoax, and the ongoing, just unbelievable just attacks. There's just no way they're going to be able to not answer for what they have done and then say, now let's move on because we have a Democrat president. That's not going to happen.
Representative, address that. Your thoughts there.
Yeah, and I don't think those situations are comparable. I firmly believe that what the president has done here is just so undemocratic to attack the institution of voting and democracy, and I hope the damage isn't irreparable. But I think what he's done has really shaken our country to its core, and it is unforgivable.
Yeah, just like the Russia hoax and the impeachment and all of that is unforgivable.
James, what about this situation we're in now? There are, where do you stand on this first? Let's get to that. Do you believe there were isolated irregularities, or do you believe there was widespread fraud?
Well, I think we need to define the issue of the irregularities. It goes down, we have to have a fundamental question that's answered, and that is this, is that who determines the process for elections? And the constitutions of many states, I think in the U.S. Constitution, we can ask the lawyer, that it's the legislatures. Well, what about those irregularities where you had election clerks deciding to extend voting by 3 days without going through the legislature? There's all those sorts of irregularities that now courts are dodging answering, which is the fundamental issue. So if you want to talk about, is it fraud in the sense of someone stealing a ballot and voting? I don't think it was a lot of that. I think it was more of a systemic irregularity that did not follow the proper process for changing the, how voting was going to take place. That's the problem.
We saw the state of Utah make changes through the legislature, albeit, and states did have to scramble here. Representative, your thoughts on the process that we saw, because James is right, we saw things changing at the last minute in some areas.
Yeah, and everything this year has been unprecedented, and voting is no exception, but changing the voting is not the same as fraud. Changing the methods, adding ballot boxes, extending deadlines, and I think changing the rules is different than saying these votes shouldn't count because of X, Y, and Z. And you know, well over 50 courts have rejected these ideas, and that's, you know, as a lawyer, that's who I turn to. He's had his chance to litigate it. He needs to concede and move on.
All right, I want to get to one other topic with you gentlemen, and that is the Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. We saw the governor and other state leaders meet up at the Capitol this week to unveil that. The idea, just as the title suggests, is to create equality, more equality throughout the state of Utah. James, let's start with you. What impact do you see this having in our state?
Well, I mean, I applaud the effort, but one thing that I hope comes out of this is that we must decouple the fight for racial equality and inclusion from politics or partisanship. This idea that somehow the only people that are racist are conservatives and progressives are not, that's where the underlying problem is. The fight for racial equality is an issue about race, and it's irrespective of where you were born, who you are, what party you belong to. It truly is an issue of race, and I hope this can start that discussion, and we stop weaponizing race for political reasons.
Representative, we have about 40 seconds left. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, and I agree. I think this is a great first step, and hopefully this isn't where it ends. This is obviously something that both parties and all people need to work towards so that we can, you know, get rid of racism and be actively anti-racist.
All right, one of the things we heard the governor say is, you know, talking about it doesn't do the job. We need to act, and that was his main theme as he rolled that out. Gentlemen, great conversation. Appreciate both of you being here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. State leaders will take the oath of office on Monday, January 4th. The Utah legislative session starts on Tuesday, January 19th, and the presidential inauguration is the following day, Wednesday, the 20th. Make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your day. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.